Hello and welcome to season 5, Episode 8 of Dualistic Unity. I don't need to always think about myself. And isn't that beautiful? Isn't it beautiful that you don't have to always think about yourself? That you'll still be there. You'll still be what is, whether you're considering some fictitious idea of you or not. You're always you, whether you're thinking about it or not.
My brain disagrees with you. My brain would like to think about everything that you just said and then think about what it thought about everything that you just said and then think about those thoughts as well and try to come up with some resolution that will lead me to an answer that makes me feel more certain and valuable. My brain does not like anything that you just said, Andrew. The nice thing is that I don't necessarily have to listen to my brain. I can just let it do all of the stuff that I just described and more without actually having to be in the driver's seat the entire goddamn time. In the same way that I don't have to listen to each and every beat of my heart to make sure that it continues to run. So it is very nice to know that. That said, I am very excited for today's episode because today's episode features a guest that has been around since the beginning of our podcast, who was actually one of our initial supporters, was one of the first people in the community that I talked to directly one-on-one, and she was also at our first retreat as well as a recent retreat. I am very happy to welcome Daisy here. Daisy is the co-host of the Life Unpotted podcast. I do recommend that you check out that podcast because it is insightful and compelling, and it's a lot of fun to listen to. So that all said, Daisy, welcome. How you doing?
Thank you. I am stoked to be here. I feel like it's my time to be here. I've known you guys long enough that this will be a fun conversation.
Oh yeah, I'm very excited for it. I was able to just in the last couple of days check out some of your recent podcast episodes. So I've listened to a few in the past as well. So it was uh it was fun to see or feel a little bit of a shift in the last couple episodes. And I think there was a very healthy amount of lack of certainty. Not that you guys ever had any certainty on the podcast before, but I appreciated your willingness to step into both of the episodes that I heard without having any idea of where they were going to go and understand that you're unpacking a lot, as we always are. Everyone's always unpacking a lot, and yet we still try and go into things with an idea of how they're going to go. And I think there's a beauty in being willing to step into something with no fucking idea how it's going to go, because that's when the good shit comes up, right? That's when the stuff that surprises yourself starts to come up. And so it was beautiful to see that shift. And I know you talked a little bit about some recent insights that you've been having in regards to your perception of yourself relative to your perception of reality. So I would love to hear even just a little bit about some of the recognitions that you've been having over the last couple of weeks.
Certainly. That's a very loaded question because, each day it's like a million new insights. So I'll do my best to elaborate on that. So I guess for background, I already said this, but I was in the most recent retreat, one of the recent retreats in Colorado, and I had an experience where when we were taking mushrooms, when I was on 2 grams, that I was having just a very great experience. And I noticed that there are other people who were having a bit of a more intense experience. And upon reflection of that, I recognized, why didn't I, go deeper? It's not a matter of like I wanted to, but it was just kind of like, well, why didn't that happen when that was happening at the retreat? And in retrospect, that's a great time to bring this up because I just really processed a lot of this yesterday. I realized not only like on that particular trip was I just like treading water really, really well, but I was treading water. I learned that I'm very good at treading water in life, of being disconnected from my emotional states, my body. Like I'm just very good at that. And that was a really hard recognition to have because once I recognized that, I realized that I have been living so much in the mind. And those two things just can't exist without each other. So I just have been reflecting on that quite a bit. And that brought up, of course, a ton of insecurities, so many insecurities. But what I realized was, and I feel like I kind of had a trip yesterday entirely sober, because upon this recognition a few days ago, I had, and prior to that, weeks, after the retreat, I was in a place where I was like off on a rocket ship of like, I'm not going to deal with any of this. I'm going to like, I'm going to like get really caffeinated and just like really monitor like my state that I'm in, to ensure that it stays up here. And I realized a few days ago, like that is not sustainable. And it was the first time I feel like I've had awareness of this in a new level, which I really attribute to the mushroom trip. In hindsight, like perspective after, I digested that. But what I realized was it took me a few days to like really be in a uncomfortable state of, I don't like how I'm feeling. I feel like everything in my life is not great. And I didn't push any of that away. It was probably 3 days of just like being uncomfortable and like getting back in touch with like my emotional state. And it wasn't pretty. And then yesterday I was hanging out with a really good friend, and I was becoming very aware of like my insecurities. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to just express how I'm feeling. And it ended up like bringing a lot of insights. I was able to recognize that in that moment, the insecurities that come up, they're not true. Not only are they not true, they have no fact being in reality. And when we try to get in the way of our thoughts and our emotions and to control that they should always be great, we're going to get stuck in them. I'm realizing if we just show up how we're feeling, there's no place that we need to be or to get. It's really just confronting exactly what's in front of us. And sometimes we don't do that. Sometimes we run from it. And I was just really grateful that I was able to have the awareness of that, and we can get more into it. But that was probably like my most recent insight. So I don't know if that's what you were expecting, Andrew, but this is an uncertain place.
I love that. I love everything that you just communicated. I don't know what episode it was. I'm pretty sure it was in season 2 or season 3, but at one point we were talking about the ups and the downs of all of this, and how when you're on those downs, or what are perceived to be downs, that you're actually giving yourself an opportunity for the next climb. Like everything that you learn throughout that entire process, as long as you're not getting in the way and hammering on the brakes, it's like you're drifting down a hill and gaining momentum if you just let go and let it pass. And then all of a sudden it leads to the next climb because you're like, woo, I'm past. And then you start to feel good again. But it's the misconception of like, I got to always be up here. It's like, yeah, but then you can't build momentum the next time around. So you want to get that momentum to give yourself, the lesson that builds the context that creates next insight, which creates the next lesson, and so on.
Yeah, you have to be willing to let that happen, to see what's behind it as well. Like I think a lot of people have experiences that they keep at bay because they're not willing to look, because it's too uncomfortable to look at it. But then if you don't look at it, you can't see it, and you can't see where it's coming from. It's like if you refuse, if you feel fucking, I don't know, if you hear a bomb go off outside, like I'm thinking like atomic bomb. This is like extreme example, but if you're not willing to look out your window because it's a little bit uncomfortable to think that that might have happened, you won't be able to respond to it. Like you have to be willing to look at it. And oftentimes it's very uncomfortable to look and realize, oh, there's shit there. Oh, there's something there. And so we'll just avoid it to avoid the discomfort. But it's like the discomfort is the initial step towards digging in to where it's coming from. And it's beautiful when people start to realize, oh, the discomfort is actually necessary. Oh, I actually almost have to feel discomfort in order to be able to let it go. And so it's always incredible to see that when people recognize it. And as much as maybe our experiences differed, especially towards the end of that retreat, and I was maybe one of the people you saw going through something a little bit more intense, it was that willingness to look at something I had been avoiding looking at for years and years and years. And it was uncomfortable to the point that it shook me for a good week. I was feeling uncomfortable as fuck, and like I had, lost all my progress. But it was that was the initial sort of phase of digging into where that was coming from and eventually being willing to let that go. So once you start to realize that discomfort's a requirement of working through shit, you don't fear it quite so much.
Now, that's an interesting point, and I'd like to go back to what Daisy was saying about treading very well. It's really important to recognize that at first, it's kind of like if I was to take somebody who doesn't know how to swim and then put them on a surfboard and send them onto the water and be like, surf. They would do everything they can to stay on that board. The idea of falling off that board would be terrifying. But until they do, they'll never realize there's nothing to fear. Right? And so there really is the point of the entire experience. But that said, and this is something I want to explore a bit today, because we fall into this habit of trying to think about where we lie amongst the people in our lives. And it's really easy to fall into the idea of support, especially in a relationship, in a friendship, in any kind of relationship whatsoever. It's easy to look at your support network, the people who are there in case everything goes to shit, that kind of thing. And in doing so, we're kind of imagining ourselves never learning to swim, but hooking up our surfboard to other people's surfboards. So that way we won't tip over. We're never going to go in the water. And in doing so, we never get over our fear of that water. And so I guess what I was hoping to explore a bit here, because your experience during the retreat was your experience. I think that was the most interesting thing to me about your experience, was that you really were just riding it out yourself. Everybody was doing their thing and you were watching them do it, but you were defining your own experience at that point. And so I'd like to discuss the value of accepting responsibility and just going alone in your own life, in your own existence, from your own state of awareness.
Yeah, it's a good theme, a good statement. It's interesting because I think our entire life, or maybe people have different narratives, but I feel like I always had a narrative that I was always, I don't know if it was like in someone's shadow or just like next to someone to ease tensions or to live out their potential to help them with what they're doing. And in that way, I feel like it's so easy to get attached to people. I think a lot of insecurity, I mean, everyone has insecurities. Like, I think tripping has given me like a new appreciation for insecurities because like everyone has them. Like people you would never think have insecurities, you would never guess what their insecurities are. And I think there is such a beauty to expressing them because you realize that they have no bearing. You're just projecting an emotion onto them. So going back to like this theme of really paving your own path without the expectation of others, I think looking at your fears certainly helps you take responsibility for those possible things that may cause your fears to come true. But I think it's you when you are afraid to look at your fears, you tend to look to other people who are afraid to look at their fears. And when you're in that incident, or when you're in that situation, you start to feel really comfortable by that. But I think it gets to a point where you no longer feel comfortable by that. You actually start to feel uncomfortable by that. And it makes you viscerally uncomfortable. So I think it's a common theme to start questioning your relationships with people, whether it's friendships, romantic relationships, familial relationships, and say something has got to give here. And I think that it's always uncomfortable because it's way easier to tell people what they want to hear or basically just not show up as yourself because there's so much fear there. I don't know why. But I think everyone can understand that it's uncomfortable to want to express your opinion. But what I've learned is that by expressing your opinion, it's like you're ripping the band-aid off, not saying that like I'm even that good at it, because I don't think anyone is ever like an expert at anything. I think there's always going to be new challenges that are presented to you, even when you think, especially when you think everything's perfect, you probably aren't looking closely enough at like what's going on. That because when post retreat, I thought things were so good, and like I was so thinking about all of these new concepts and these new thoughts, and like I'm like, wow. Little do I know, like there is something that I'm not looking at. So I think that the right people in your life can can nudge you to look at those things. I think the initial response is to like abort, want to abandon friendships, what kind of, or like relationships, familiar relationships, where you don't want to do the work with that person. And I think there's all kinds of instances where we're on that side, where we're getting the talking to of like, you know, something's just not right here, whether it's tension or whether it's um, just changes, where people are going through changes and you no longer serve the same role to the person anymore. So I just think that, and like, one of the things I struggle with is confrontation, but I don't think expressing how you feel to someone has to be confrontational. I think it's just all we can ever really do is really, I don't know, not to use the word confront, but all we can really do is like walk through the fire that's in front of us. Because I think it's so easy to get this idea where we want challenge and we want growth and we want these things, and we project that onto our career, of where we're at in our career. We project that onto romantic relationships or friendships or interests and passions, when in reality there's always a fire that's in front of us. It's just one that we're too afraid to look at, and it's probably one that's closer than we realize. And I think before you're able to walk through the fire with that, you really have to get comfortable with what you're feeling yourself. But ultimately realize no one ever feels ready to do anything, especially the things that are the most important. And really, that's what I'm trying to get comfortable with, is what's in front of me and what do I have to do. And avoidance is, I think, the enemy of growth.
Ooh, well, fucking said, Daisy. Oh man, so the sort of imagery that was coming to my head when you were talking about going through the fire, avoiding certain things, and this is just from my own experience and kind of the thing I just alluded to, was, say there is a fire in front of us. We're looking at it all the time. We see it, that it's there, but we kind of like convince ourselves that if we can just, avoid it, the flames are like spewing out. And if we can just like dodge them, kind of like matrix dodge the flames as they're coming out, we're good. And we're good because we're avoiding the flame. We're avoiding the thing, whatever. Oftentimes it's some deep shit that someone is continuing to impact them because they're still almost focused on the fire and their ability to avoid it, and their ability to dance around it, thinking that that's what makes them good. And so we can be very good. And when I say we, as always, I mean me. I can be very good at just subtly avoiding things enough to think that I've overcome something that's still right there, as opposed to being willing to recognize that I'm still good, even if the flame hits me, even if it touches me. But I've gotten very good at valuing myself based on how well I can avoid the flames, instead of just saying, fuck you, flames. I'm going to walk through you. You can't hurt me. I'll be good no matter what. My value doesn't change or drop from getting burned. It's not about not getting burned. It's about recognizing that you'll be okay if you do, when you do, as you go through it.
And it will hurt. It's really important to recognize that regardless of what you tell yourself, there's going to be pain and suffering involved going through this stuff. There's going to be discomfort, because that is the process of change. That is always the process of change. The discomfort is the resistance to that change. It's the clinging to the familiar. It's clinging to the past. That's why it's uncomfortable. The less you do that, the less discomfort there is. And it reduces the amount of pain. But the pain is always associated with the change that's happening and our opinion of it, our resistance to it. Right? That's why we suffer. We don't like this. It doesn't matter. It's happening. Right? And you can distort it. You can create all kinds of consequence for yourself running from it. Or you can just accept it and look at the fact that every lesson you've ever learned that was worth learning was something that you wanted to avoid at one point.
Yeah. And I think also there's this idea of like going through pain or going through discomfort has to be painful, but I think there's different types of pain. I think like just like the example I gave of like walking through the fire, like I always thought growing up that like discomfort meant like making it more difficult for myself, like creating more emotional pain and difficulty and like putting like kind of working against myself. Right. So I think that recognizing that like we can also soften as we're going through, we can like totally take care of ourselves as we go through the discomfort. And the discomfort is discomfort enough. We don't need to make it more uncomfortable. We don't need to get mad at ourselves and fight ourselves and be angry at ourselves, because that's actually resisting the discomfort in a really messed up way, because we think that we need to make things really difficult because our brain gets so entangled and so caught up in an idea of how things should be that we forget what is happening in actual reality. And we just make things so much more difficult. Like, I think I spent like 28 years of my life making things more difficult than they needed to be, because everyone's conditioned in different ways, but everyone's conditioned generally in a way, unless I don't know, you have a really special bubble that you grew up in. I don't know if that exists, where you're not hard on yourselves and you don't internalize things. And it's really interesting just like growing the awareness of these things and noticing these things that bubble up and not having to take them seriously. Maybe you do in the moment, but maybe like 5-10 minutes later, you're like, oh, And I just think it's interesting because there's so many different layers of it where you can conceptually be recognizing these things, but you aren't feeling it. And I was speaking with someone recently who was saying oftentimes, almost always, our brain understands things before our body. Like intellectually, like we might understand something, but the real work is feeling what you are intellectualizing, because your body could still be stuck in 2002 when something happened and you internalize something, but your mind is like, oh, I'm fine. But I think that's what happens. And I think that it's so easy to avoid the physical feelings. And we live in like such a mind dominant society where there are infinite things where we can go and project this feeling of lack and insecurity onto, whether it's like a new gym membership or it's like a new like master class. I don't know. There's so many places we can go and project all these insecurities, when sometimes what we need to do is just like take care of ourselves. And really, and that could be like simple things like slowing down and like stretching and like just not having any expectation, because a lot of these things have expectations, comparisons, competition, and we never really know what we want. I don't think we like listen to our body. And I think when we are out of whack, we're out of whack with our intuition. And I think that when we're out of whack with like our intuition and our feeling, we can't really make sound decisions because we're like disconnected from like intelligence of what is. And I think it's easy for people to spend so much of their life in that and think they're unintelligent, when in reality, like no one's unintelligent. Everyone just gets caught up in the mind.
Everyone is intelligence. It's interesting. It dawned on me that we're using the imagery of going through the fire, but almost immediately there's this assumption that we're coming from a place that isn't the fire. And we're always in the fire. We're always in change. And the whole thing is just allowing ourselves to go through it, rather than protecting ourselves with a narrative of how are we doing? Because that's really what all of our thoughts come down to. How am I doing? And immediately we slow down and we wrap ourselves in this little ball of false certainty. And now we're still in the fire, but we're not moving anymore. Now we're just stuck because of all this weight and wondering how we're doing, where we can just let go and slip right through, right? Just get used to it, move so fast through it, so fluidly through it that it never burns you because it never touches you.
It's like the fire is reality itself, right? And getting caught up in conceptual ideas, expectations, what we should be, where I should be at, expectations is the idea that we're not in the fire. So then the fire, which is the discomfort of looking at what is, which is always right in front of us at all times, is what we avoid. So avoiding the fire is avoiding reality itself. And then there's going to be consequences to that, because when you avoid reality, you're in the conceptual, you're maintaining an idea of yourself because you think reality is the issue, but it's actually just the perception that you're separate from it, that you're avoiding it, you're dancing around it, that's causing the distortion and the suffering and all of the consequences that come with it is just stemming from the idea that you're not reality, that you're not the world, that you're something other than that needs to face it. And so the discomfort and things that arise from facing it is almost like where you can live, but it's the perspective that I shouldn't be uncomfortable that causes us to avoid it. Because it's like that state of freedom, uncertainty, discomfort. They're all like flying would be uncomfortable to someone who's used to standing on the ground. And it's the feeling then that we avoid, which is again the avoidance of reality, which is, so it all comes back to the avoidance of the reality of what we are.
Yeah, it does. And it's really crazy because I think one of you said we can get stuck in this idea if we choose to not keep going through fire. Like, we have this idea that we're supposed to be comfortable. And it's so interesting because society kind of sells us this message that we can be comfortable after we work really hard for 60 years and put money towards our 401k and we work for the last 20 years of our life, basically. So at that point, we can just fuck off and be really comfortable. But I don't think that's how I know that's not how it works. You don't just get to have all comfort with no discomfort. You have to go through difficulty, and difficulty doesn't have to be hard if you're not resisting it. If you acknowledge, and I think if you acknowledge that it's going to end, and I think what a lot of people lack is perspective. And when I say people, I mean me. Until recently, I feel like even with perspective and awareness that these difficult moments they're going to end. You just don't know when they're going to end. And when you accept that they may not end, or when you accept that you don't know when they're going to end, it's generally when they end. When you start taking action at confronting what you're afraid of.
Well said. Absolutely. Because that's it. It becomes a priority. All of a sudden you recognize maybe nothing's going to change unless I do something. Right. And that's often what we're waiting for. And it's the same with past trauma. Unfortunately, sometimes people will get caught in this loop of waiting for an apology, waiting for the person who hurt them to recognize that they hurt them, to make amends, that kind of thing. And you can spend years just waiting for something that may never come, when the fact is that you're the one at that point that's holding on to the hurt. You're the one that's actually perpetuating the trauma itself, expecting somebody else to change for you when all you have to do is change yourself. And it's so very important to take this stance that it is just you. It's so important to take the stance that there is no one else that can take the driver's seat in your existence, because there isn't. As much as we want there to be, and this is why we are so easy to manipulate. This is why we will accept false promises of politicians and religions alike. Is because we just don't want to be alone and responsible for what we do, because we have no faith in ourselves.
I just had a quick thought of, it's so easy to think that we are afraid that we are not capable. But I think it's realizing that no one's not capable as long as you're willing to face your difficulties or ahead of you. And anyone can achieve whatever, to an extent, everyone can achieve whatever they want to achieve if they are facing their difficulties that lie ahead of them. And I think it's so easy to get caught up and think that, no, you can't do this. That's just your insecurities. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. The choice is the capability. The decision is the capability itself, right? It's just the willingness to find out, to step into uncertainty, because the choice is the state of uncertainty. And that's like the wall. That's the line. That's the door we don't want to walk through. And that it's what happens once we choose to do so is kind of irrelevant. You've already done it once you've made the choice to stop mulling over whether or not you can, whether or not you're capable of doing it. It's just the willingness to step into it. That's what someone's capable of. I was just, my family was watching this thing and I was half paying attention as I was doing stuff in the background, but it was like a series on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and people can have all their opinions about him. He's a interesting dude, to say the least. And but what I will say is that he went from dominating bodybuilding to dominating acting to becoming a politician. And there's, I'm sure, tons and tons of people who had tons and tons of ideas of him, and he just didn't really consider it. Like his capability was just not even the idea of being able to do it, and who knows what sort of ideas he had of himself, but it was just a lack of doubt. There was just nothing saying that he couldn't, right? And so his capability came from just a willingness to find out. Like we all have the potential to find out. It's just whether or not we're willing to not even believe that we can, but let go of the idea that we can't. It's just the letting go of the certainty that I can't do that that allows us to find out. And then with a little bit less concern, with a little bit of an idea of what it means about me, without so much attachment to that my value is dictated based on how well I do on this, it makes it easier. That recognition in and of itself that my value isn't tied to anything that anyone thinks about me, anything that I'm thinking about myself, that any idea I maintain of myself is not me. My idea of myself is not me, just makes that whole process of finding out easier, because finding out is intelligence being expressed. And that's where we're all coming from. That's the depths of us, is that intelligence that we're all connected to. And there's sure genetic predispositions for people, but they're not so different. I think a lot of that sway is based on the ideas that we hold on to of what we think our capabilities to be, as opposed to just recognizing that we are capability itself if we're willing to let go of the things that are holding us back.
Yeah, I mean, it can't help me think, but from when I found you guys, I was what, I guess, was that 2 years ago? Is that when you first started doing the community Zooms? Well, I remember like joining the community Zooms and being like nervous to first like say anything. Second, I was like, how do they talk for so long? Like Ray goes in these like long tangents of just like saying things, and like I could never talk for more than like 5 seconds. Like that makes me really uncomfortable. And I believed that. And that's why starting a podcast was so difficult for me, because I thought I had this huge limiting belief that I have nothing to say. But what I found was creating an intentional space where I had to talk. It kind of let that limiting belief go. Not right away. Right away, it was very uncomfortable, and it was very much like getting mad and getting frustrated and getting so caught up in how things should be. But through the process of starting a podcast, I feel like I really learned to trust myself and to connect. That's when I realized like the reason we're having such a good conversation right now is because it's all coming from the same source. Like it's all coming from the same thing. It's because we're all connected with what we're talking about. And I think that matters more. Everyone can tap into that. So that's what matters more than anything else. Like, seriously, if you told me 5 years ago I'd have a podcast and I'd be on your guys' podcast right now, I wouldn't believe you. But it's funny how that happens with our insecurities and our limiting beliefs, is that they slowly change. And as we face them, that's when they change and become less strong. And you just have to keep jumping into not insecurity, you have to keep jumping into uncertainty, because that's where you find out. And there's no right way for anything to be, whether or not, we're told there is. There's not, and you have to go and find out for yourself. And that's really where I think the excitement is just figuring it out. And I think it takes a level of separating yourself from what your mind tells you to reach that point. Like you have to really become aware of your layers and the levels of bullshit you've been told and that you've internalized. Like you have to do that work. And I think sometimes like when you start doing that work, it can be really unsatisfying because you're like, nothing's changing. But it's the long haul. It's forever. It's either you're doing it forever or you're not doing it forever. Like you have to, things take time. And especially learning what has made you the person you are takes time. And I think it's unlearning who you've thought you've been, because you never are what you think you are.
I'm really enjoying the metaphor of the fire right now. And the reason is just because it's going through the change, it's going through the fire that allows us to burn away all of these things that don't serve us. They burn away all of the things that we've told ourselves for years because they come into conflict with reality. All of a sudden, we're going through the fire. We're actually proving ourselves wrong. every step of the way. Because what are we telling ourselves the rest of the time? That we can't do it. So every time we do, we burn away another layer of that bullshit, and we expose more and more of our sensitivity, and we get better and better at going through the fire.
Exactly. It's that finding out, because you don't know. Like, you never know what's next, what's to come, what you're capable of. And just like what's always happened has no dictation or indication or impact over what will happen. And I think that's, at least for myself, where I've gotten caught throughout my life is, oh, things have always been this way. Oh, this happened, and therefore this will happen in the future. It's concern for the past, fearing it will happen again in the future. And there's no connection unless we maintain it. It's like we're the potential bridge from the past to the future. Our conceptual idea of ourself is the glue between everything that has happened and everything that will happen. And as we maintain that, as we keep it up, as we keep protecting it and building it and maintaining it and sculpting it and like looking around, making sure no one's going to, come over and bust it down. It's like we're able to continue to think that everything that has happened will dictate everything that will. And so a recognition that that doesn't mean anything about you is like a melting away of that gap. It's like being the flame in the middle and being this fucking ice sculpture. And that's the connection between the past and the future. And as you step into the flame, the ice sculpture melts. The past and the future aren't connected anymore. There's no requirement or continuation of that past idea. And that's the whole idea. I know people have talked about it in the past, and I've made videos about it, just like dying to the past, dying to the idea, every moment dying to that idea is that experience of continuing to face reality, continuing to step into that flame, continuing to step into the uncertainty, the willingness to recognize that I don't know what's to come. But in order to maintain that, you must maintain an idea of yourself. And that idea of yourself is built off of everything that's happened. And so, of course, there's going to be the fear that that's going to continue to happen because you're fucking continuing to create it in each and every moment. And that concern, I resonate with everything you said there, with the concern of feeling like you don't have anything to say. That was everything I went through when I started out with content. That was my whole fucking life. That's where everything I talk about comes from, is that concern, that fear, that false certainty that I don't have something to say. Like, that was more comfortable to me than letting go and recognizing, well, I feel like I have nothing to say, but maybe I don't fucking know. Maybe I should just find out. Maybe I should fucking say something and then find out if I have something to say. But of course, if you're so concerned about it and you don't say anything, you're creating the fear as you're stepping through it. You're being that bridge of all of the things that have happened and creating them again as you go, because you're maintaining the concern about what things mean about this fictitious idea of you that's never really been you.
And I think this is where this idea that you've had of yourself, and you start to put yourself out there and you start to like question, oh, is this true or not? Just by ripping off the Band-Aid and just, and Andrew's sake, jumping on social media and talking, like just posting videos and seeing how people respond. I think a lot of people are doing this with social media to try and like, I'm finding a lot of people are trying to come out of like, I don't know, a cocoon into figuring out like who they actually are, not necessarily resonating with the life that they have or the social circle they have. And I think that's because when you start to do this, like your social circle, your community can start to like feel really uncomfortable, and they might try to reinforce this belief you have of yourself, not because like they're horrible people or a bad person, but because this makes others look at what maybe their comfortable narratives that aren't true are. And it's really just so interesting to like have perspective on this type of journey. I don't know, is this the journey? Is this just like the human experience? If you want to turn a blind eye to it, like you can, but it's always there. And it's just so interesting that everyone experiences these things. And we like to pretend that they don't. And I think the more we pretend that we don't, the more power we take from each and every person. And that's why talking about it, like, there is so much value in not knowing what you're going to say, but getting out there and saying it anyway. Because there was this particular podcast where I think it was like one of the first guests we had on, where I was like, that insecurity came up again, where I was like, oh God, like, I don't know what to say. I have no expertise in what this person is talking about, but I'm like, wait, no, this is the point. And I said something and my insecurity was like, that was so stupid. Like, that was awful. Why did you say that? But I was editing it and I was like, oh, that was totally fine. So it's just like, that's like a perfect example of, but what I chose there was like, despite like what is coming up, I don't care. I'm going to like let go. And I've never had such incredible conversation, because it's not necessarily what's being said. It's the ability to let go and have the conversation and know that maybe you will say something stupid, but you probably won't. It's probably going to like be a deep, uncovered, really interesting, nuanced topic or nuanced piece of information that a lot of people are thinking about. And that's the lesson I feel like that I continue to learn, is that we are way more capable and we know way more than we think we might. And the only way, literally the only way to figure it out is by doing something that terrifies you, pisses you off, stresses you out. And it's so much easier to believe like, I can't do this and I want to stop and I want to quit. But that is something that you can do, but you'll never figure out what your potential is if you do that, if you quit or give up. And it's for the long haul. And it's most difficult when getting started, trying to like shift. I mean, there's plenty of analogies, but it's an uncomfortable experience, and discomfort doesn't have to be miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be quite enthusiastic about being uncomfortable with the knowledge that it's doing something positive for you. Right. And it is just getting used to it. But it's interesting because I like what you were saying there, that it's always hardest at first. And this is very true. But I think that we forget how life is also going in stages, not levels. I think that that's inaccurate. But what I mean is that our context changes. And so the things that we face within a certain sphere of context change. And so like the considerations of my daughter when she was 8 to 10 years old, for example, aren't the considerations of her now. So she thinks different things. She has different challenges to go through. She has to apply the same lessons, go through the fire, but the fire looks different, right? And she has a different perspective of herself going through it. The entire thing has changed. And so now all of a sudden it's like we go through the hard part at first, we get better at it. We're like, yeah, I've got this. And then all of a sudden our context widens and we got to go through that whole hard part again, right? Because now it's like a different level, but it's not a level. I just want to make that clear for the listener. Nobody's above anyone else. Just make that clear. It's just, they're just different sized rooms, let's just say. And each different room requires you to go through different lessons, but it's always harder at first. And then you go to the next room where it's harder at first again, then it gets easier. It's the wonderful cyclical pattern of life.
Yeah, it's really like an expansion of yourself. It's like a widening circle, right? And so with the consideration of levels, because we've mentioned that so many times, like fuck levels, fuck those ideas, fuck all that like spiritual level IQ fucking bullshit. And with the widening of your recognition of yourself, like if that's the recognition, that the more you push, the more discomfort there is with the push. But with that, everyone else is a component of that, and people are willing to push or not push. And the more people push, the more they start to overlap and they start to see themselves in everyone else. And so it's not levels at all, because those people are now within your purview. So you're starting to see them as you're letting go more and more of what you think you are. You're starting to see more and more commonalities, not in your ideas of other people, but just in the recognition of being reality in other people. And so with that falls away any ideas of levels, because that brings in the comparison and all of the judgments that come with that from perceiving yourself as separate from everyone else. So with the expansion of the continued expansion, your willingness to expand starts to include and involve other people by necessity. There's only so much space. And as those people are expanding as well, they're taking up more space in a sense, just recognizing more of what they are. And so there's going to be a higher likelihood of those people overlapping. And I think that's what we're seeing with these conversations, with dualistic unity, with Life Unpotted, with all these things starting to recognize, oh, I'm not just what I think, feeling a little bit more freedom, which allows for a little bit more of an expansion, a little bit more of an expression, more of a willingness, a freedom to step into those spots like social media, where there's a higher likelihood of connecting with more people who are willing to expand. And it's like all tied in together, but every time that widens, it's exploring new ground. It's stepping through the door and you don't know what's through the other side. So of course it's going to be uncomfortable. You're like, I don't fucking know what's out there. Let's go find out. And then someone else is like, but what if it's scary? I'm like, what if it's not? I don't know. It's up to you. I guess you can stay here if you want, but I'm out. See ya.
Yeah, the idea of expansion was really well put, because it's like everyone is either constantly expanding and everyone's going to find their like stop sign. Like everyone is experiencing the same thing. Some people might be more expanded than others, but everyone's still going to have like the same like cycle of going through things, like that stop sign, like that time where we're like questioning everything. That's just how you're perceiving yourself. It's not how you're being perceived by others. So I totally agree with these people who are looking to expand constantly and go through these difficulties are finding each other. And it's really interesting because it's like a whole new world. It's looking at life a different way when you're able to find people who help further bring you up and further remind you that this is happening and this is actually just an illusion to your mind. Like you don't have to go too deep into this. It's really helpful. Like you start to see that you're not so different. I think it's really easy because when you see other people who aren't so in the illusion, you feel so much more familiar towards them, or you feel like you know them, or they feel like an extension of yourself. And that is so unique but it's also not. Like I think that's kind of the whole point, is that there was never supposed to be division between us. And we start to realize this illusion, or the illusion of certainty, the further you fall into believing that there is certainty, the larger the illusion you have is, and the more you create this idea of division. And it's not the point. And that's also part of like the healing and the experience of being a human, is that if you're being an asshole to someone else, it's probably because you're not doing the work yourself. Like people are triggering you because their work that they're doing, or their lack of work they're doing, is triggering the work that you need to do in yourself. So the people that resist you the most are always the ones that need to do the work the most, and look at the ring of fire, whatever you want to call it, that's in front of them. Because if someone is crying, or if someone is hurt, or if someone is acting out and it's making you really mad, and this being me, like me, I'll put myself like on the chopping board. Like I've been that person. So especially like in a romantic relationship, like you're going to trigger each other. And if someone is, or if your partner is triggering you and you don't know why, you really have to slow down and ask, like, am I doing enough on my own to reflect why I'm so angry? And you never want to. And the longer you go without doing that, the more difficult your life's going to be. And it comes in waves. And sometimes, it's not so great. And then it becomes great again. So it's just like this cyclical thing of this experience, and knowing that we're never going to be stuck if we're actually engaging in what is happening in reality. We'll never be stuck. Okay, so this is like a really random thought, but I was thinking about different therapies. I very briefly did EMDR therapy. I had like 3 sessions and then I stopped. But that's kind of irrelevant
for our listener and me what EMDR therapy is.
So I don't really know I don't really know. It's basically like the idea of, if you are doing bilateral movements of the eyes moving different ways, like tapping on different sides of the body. It kind of helps, I think, like it's kind of like neurogenesis. It's like it's like reprocessing new ideas in a new way, shape or form. So like traumatic events or just like childhood or just whatever those things may be. Anyways, I remember reading online, I remember like reading thoughts people had on it. And a lot of people, you seem really interested, Andrew.
Didn't solve anything yet, but I'll keep trying.
No, not okay. Okay. But people online were saying like, oh, like this like brought a lot of things up, and it like really like messed me up, and this ruined me, or this like messed up like my life or changed things. And I I feel like post this recent trip, I don't know why I randomly thought of this, but I thought, oh wow, like we're never not okay. It's a story we tell ourselves. We can always handle things. We're just so afraid that maybe this is permanent, or maybe that, yeah, that's it. Maybe that this is permanent, that we actually resist experiencing it. And ironically, it keeps us in this really uncomfortable place. So I don't know. It's like we're never not okay. I think that's like a big takeaway for me from doing mushrooms to looking at all the things. From the last trip I took on the retreat, I retracted. I was like, I saw things that were too much, and my life came back, and I was super anxious, and everything was really difficult. And the opposite approach, I like opened up after this last trip on the retreat with you guys. And I recognize that it's not that scary, even though, in moments it is, but accepting that is your freedom. Acceptance is your freedom, truly.
Well said. Yeah, I think exactly what you're saying in regards to the recognition that you're always okay, you're never not okay forever, ties into the recognition of eternity. And before we were talking a little bit about getting frustrated and just the experiences that we go through, the emotions that we go through, the things that we feel, almost every single time things get overwhelming, it's, at least for me in my experience, it's the subtle concern of whether something's going to last forever. But when you recognize eternity, not in a conceptual way, but even, you think about it or try and think about it, and you just keep going, it always circles back to where you're at. It, like, eternity and here and now are the same thing. And so as you understand that you're here now for eternity, there isn't this almost subtle assumption that something else is going to end this shitstorm that's going on in my head right now. And so when you realize that you have eternity, the prioritization comes back to where you're at. And I don't know if this is something I've been sitting on for a bit. Like, I thought about this a couple of weeks ago, and I don't know if it's fully fleshed out yet, but that, for whatever reason, when I'm going through something, like I'm getting really frustrated about something, and I recognize eternity, it kind of goes away a little bit, because there's like an undertone, and I'm not exactly sure where it comes from, that my frustration is going to be ended by something other than me. And when I recognize there isn't an endpoint where it just stops, everything just keeps going. I'll always be here now. It's like, oh, that's not worth continuing to be frustrated over. That doesn't really make much sense. It's like there's a thought that there's going to be something that solves the frustration outside of me just letting it go. And it's always just that. It's always just, and it's like I use excuses to let it go. Like something else comes up, and then it's almost like I forget about it sometimes, and that's what stops it. But when you realize there isn't anything else that's going to come along to pull that from you, you're willing to let it go in the moment right there. And it goes hand in hand with the prioritization of your experience here and now, which is always your responsibility, goes hand in hand with the recognition of eternity, that there isn't an end outside of you.
Well, it's kind of like if I was to tell you, I've got $1 billion for you, Andrew, and I'm going to give it to you at some point. and you'd be stoked. In fact, after a little while, you'd start to get a little impatient. You're like, when's the money coming, right? When are you going to do that? Right. And I'd be like, oh, in the future. And that would really bother you. You'd be like, but when? Like, how far is that away? And then if I went, well, I'm going to give it to you after you die, all of a sudden you'd be like, well, why the fuck am I waiting? And you'd just let it go, right? Because it becomes too far away to be relevant anymore. And this is the same thing with frustration. The problem is that we want an immediate solution. And as long as we believe there is one, we have to get to it. And then when there isn't one, we're just like, oh, I'm just kind of got to sit in this then. And then we just do something with it instead of trying to escape it.
And that maintains the frustration because we're not at the spot that it goes away yet. And our impatience and frustration go hand in hand. So the thought that it's going to go away at some point in the future and it's not here yet only maintains the frustration. But without that, because frustration stems from stress and the idea that things should be different than they are, but they're never going to be different than they are. They're always how they are here and now.
Acceptance is your freedom. Like, it's so interesting how that works. But it takes going through the cycle to really understand that. So it becomes a little more simple the next go around. Not meaning like there's not going to be like another, I'm not going to say level, but another experience that will make you question everything. But that's the fun of it. I'm learning is that once you make your go round once with kind of begrudgingly having this awareness of these experiences of kind of like trying to put the puzzle pieces together where it's not super comfortable, it starts, you realize it's, well, number one, I mean, I never even said this, but like my biggest takeaway from that trip was that it's not that serious. It's only as serious as we give weight to it to be. But as soon as we realize it's not that serious, and if we fail, like everything's going to be fine, if not better, you start having fun with life. And like you said, like you start to just want to like live life and now, like you don't want to wait till you're dead to have $1 million. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in 10 years if you have $1 million. Giving up and squandering right now in the next 10 years is not worth it, because that's just an illusion of certainty that you're going to have that. Like you could die, something could happen. You can never guarantee that you're going to get something like that. And that's, the whole idea of saving for a day that is not now. It doesn't make sense to me anymore. It doesn't, because if you are willing to live for tomorrow, but not today, you may find that you've never actually lived. And I think that sounds like a dramatic saying, but if most people look at their lives and they complain about every hour of their day and hate everything in their life, but they're saving money, or they're paying off their mortgage, or they're doing these things that they think that they have to do, it's just, that is normalized. So people don't think that it's insane to do these things. And they look at people who are making rash decisions, not rash decisions, but making decisions to leave seemingly stable, comfortable jobs, or are looking at people who are, taking the risk and putting money into a business or into a passion, or just doing nothing at all and figuring it out. Those people, I think, are the ones that actually realize the only currency is this moment. And when you actually like realize that you are not divisive from anyone else, you can have more fun with what's happening in the moment. So it's not so fearful anymore, because what you need will always show up. Might have to do things and do difficult tasks to get there, but it's always an option. It's always available. It's just when you settle with your mind on a suffering idea that you get trapped in it.
Yeah, because it's really not about the experience you're having so much as your willingness to get something out of it. And that just comes down to how afraid and open you are, right? If you're afraid, you're going to block things out because you're trying to define yourself and hold on to what you think you know. If you're willing to find out, then you will continue to grow. But it's so interesting what you were saying earlier in terms of meeting people who are going through the fire, who are questioning their idea of themselves and being as vulnerable as possible, and then how easy it is to get along with them. And it's just because they're being vulnerable. So the divisive walls that they've been holding on to give them some sense of certainty and value aren't there. And so They are closer to you in terms of mentality. They are actually in the present with you. I remember when I was young, had I met you or anybody else, I would have told you all about who I thought I was, who I wanted to think I was, who, who had value, where I came from, what I did, all of that stuff, my skill set, my family, my history, blah, 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 blah. And I would have had no sensitivity to you as a person. I would have barely heard anything you had to say. And if you said anything that didn't align with any of the things that I was using for a sense of value, I would have had conflict with you instead of being willing to question myself and find that bridge that allows me to grow. And it really is just that. How afraid are you? And are you holding on to a fiction that you don't need to? Because if you do, the best way that you can get rid of that thing is just to go through the fire and burn it away.
Yeah, because it's not about avoiding the things or overcoming the fears even that we have. It's about recognizing that you'd be perfectly fine if they happened. And that shift is the experience of freedom. Like that right there is it. Anything could happen and I'd be okay. And this is something that I realized a few months ago in regards to recognizing yourself in as everyone and everyone you interact with is you. And it's hit me again just how much even that we prioritize our experience and prioritize like me doing well, Andrew doing well, understanding things super well. But sometimes that isn't always what's best for the whole. Sometimes me not doing things perfectly and super well allows someone else to see a connection there that wouldn't have been seen or felt if I had done everything my idea of perfect for my entire life. If you never stumble, there's no door for people to step through to see themselves in you. Because at least in the experience that we're at right now, and not to make too many assumptions, but with how invested we are in the perception of division, there's going to be a fuckload of consequences. And so oftentimes that connection comes from the consequences we experience from the investment. And so sometimes recognizing that getting caught up in shit and experiencing consequences from getting caught up in that shit may not be super comfortable for you, may not be your ideal of what's best for you, but maybe what's best for the whole. And so, again, going back to the capability, like our capability is just our willingness to step into things. It's just our willingness to be seen for what we are, right? And that is the connection right there. Like that's where we connect, is in being authentic. It's not about performing well or doing a good job or saying everything very well or perfectly or never, stumbling on in any way or in anything that we do. It's just about the willingness to step into it and find out. And the more we step into it, the more opportunities we're in to connect, to interact with people, to make ripples. As Ray's always saying, it's just about making those ripples, but you don't know what those ripples are going to look like. You don't know what the impacts are going to be of those ripples. But in order to make ripples, you got to do something. You got to be in the fire. You got to be looking at reality, as uncomfortable as it may be, in order to make any ripples at all. It's like you got to jump in the fucking pool in order to make a splash. It's not about what the judges think of your jump. It's just about the jump. That's it. That's it. Because their judgment is going to be based on their subjective opinion. And guess what? All the judges are sitting outside the pool. They're not jumping in.
Exactly. Because they're afraid to. And so they're judging you so they can feel better about it. Because the one thing I love about judgment is that if I feel insecure about something, I'm going to point out that thing in you so I feel slightly less insecure than you.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at a lot of the world's problems, it probably stems from someone being angry with someone else's decision because they couldn't face that decision. It's so simple, but It's really not that simple.
But it's always that, to your point about the world and reality. It's like, it reminds me of last week. I forget what video it was, but someone was saying how wars aren't started from people holding on to their opinions. It's started by people who aren't sure about stuff, who aren't holding on to their opinions, which just doesn't make any sense. Like, war is an expression of someone very, very tightly holding on to an opinion, being very, very sure of their opinion that isn't actually fucking sure at all. That's where wars stem from, and is when two fucking people are very, very sure of themselves, but they both are coming at it from different perspectives. And it's like, it's such a symbolic expression of just collective certainty based around a certain ideal. And that's the expression of war. And like, we see the destruction. It's not to say, again, like, no good or bad, but we can recognize the destruction where it's coming from. It's not coming from uncertainty. It's coming from very, very strong, steadfast, stern, solid certainty of people pointing things out that should definitely be different. It's like, if everyone recognizes that they don't have any fucking idea what the best answer is, what the right thing to do is, we'll start finding out. We'll all come back down to earth a little bit. Be like, oh, all right, there's stuff we can do here. There's influence to be had, but there is no control. And that false certainty is derived from the illusion that there can ever be control, that we can ever possibly know what the right answer is.
Everything stems from a projection, I think. Because the people who get the most angry, going back to very, very simple, like taking two human beings, if you're getting really angry at someone because they're doing something that is not harmful, it's probably because you're upset about something that you haven't looked at and you haven't processed and worked through. So it's coming out in obscure ways. But you can take that to the highest level of authority figures. They're not special. They're not immune from this basic function of how human brains work. So it makes sense why the world is the way it is, and in all the ways that it just simply is. But I don't know. I feel like when I realized that, it really busted popped this bubble that, growing up, I mean, you say the Pledge of Allegiance in school, like you're kind of just like told from a very early age that everyone above you, you just listen to what they're doing because they, for whatever reason, they are immune to what it means to be human. And that's what you kind of grew up thinking, is that you are less than a lot of these people who are making these decisions, when in reality, there's no difference between the two of you. So I feel like it's interesting when you see like revolts or riots or people, younger people, or just people of different thought pushing back on government, because it's kind of like, well, how much should the government be involved in? How much should they really be entrenching on our rights? What even is it? So I don't know. It's just it's interesting to think about it, because no one's really that different. And the idea of a government is just there to kind of keep us sane and to not like be going crazy with each other. But I don't know, it makes you really question the system that we have in place and the validity of it and the success of it, which I guess, judge it as you want to judge it based off your own opinion. But things are definitely crazy and definitely have consequences. But if you just think about the education system, and if we were taught like these very basic ideas at like a really young age, how things would be different, not to think about ourselves too much, maybe process the insecurities that we've internalized. Like it all starts from like a systematic change. So I don't know, people are trying to stop that. I feel like people are afraid of that because they're not willing to look at their own shit. And it's really interesting when you realize how simple it is. Not simple, but.
And the thing with change is that it's impossible to control. And so that's why we are not encouraging our kids to face the fire. We are not encouraging our kids to live in the moment. We are encouraging our kids to decide what they're going to do by the age of 12 years old for the rest of their life. We are asking them how they're going to fit into the system. And that's what it is. And it's a shame because to a system that is very much dependent on stability because it's looking for that sense of certainty, it's looking for that sense of security, it inevitably has to start working against change because change becomes a danger to it. If you have a bunch of children out there that are dreaming about doing anything without any sense of limitation whatsoever, who's to say they aren't going to reinvent the government? Who's to say they aren't going to invent some alternative form of energy that's going to call into question the entire power structure of our world? Right. And so there is almost a vested interest in stopping us and our children from facing the fire. And that's why our education system is all about, don't worry, just memorize this stuff. Don't think for yourself. Just do what everybody else is doing and think that way for the rest of your life. You'll fit in.
Oh God, that priority. Oh, when you start to see that school and all that shit is just like a distraction. It really is. Like we come out of school and we're like, fuck, I didn't really learn. Like I even in college, go to college for 4 years to a business school and then go into a job and literally not a single thing that I learned in any of my classes was used in work. Like I played baseball. I learned more from the dynamics of like my coach and team relationship and like that whole sort of collective organism than anything I learned in a classroom. Like it's incredible when you come out of that and you're like, fuck, did I just waste a lot of time being forced into being distracted so I don't think about what the fuck's going on? So I don't wonder how things could be maybe a little bit different. So I get indoctrinated into these things in order to keep any raw new insights at bay just to maintain a system that's priority is to maintain itself as opposed to derive any benefits or push and make any degree of progress. It's just a settling. And so with as above, so below, like it's incredible how we settle upon an idea, look for false certainty as a collective. Government is just a larger representation of settling. And then we have all these little things, school, work, fucking sports. I hate to say it because I love playing sports, but like professional sports are just a massive fucking distraction. Now we have sports gambling, another distraction, alcohol, another distraction. All these things just sprinkled in to society to distract us so we don't look, so we don't wonder, so we just get our little degree of comfort and striving. Daisy, as you were saying before, like we strive for that degree of comfort by the time we're 60, 65, 70, so that we can ride off. And we spend our whole adult life working towards that point where we can stop. And we live, again, as above, so below. We live for the fucking last 20 years of our life. We live for the last 2 days of the week. We live for all of these things in the future that just keep us in this cycle, keep us distracted, not able to look at things until we start to do so, until we start to wonder. And they've even been able to, ban substances that help people to start to wonder, psychedelics, cannabis, all these things. Like when you start seeing things for what they are, you're like, holy fuck. Oh my God. And I know Ray's been looking at this for a while, so he always laughs when I have these sort of reactions when I'm starting to realize, like, oh my God, they did all this shit and they got away with it. They actually got away with all this fucked up shit. This is nuts. This is ludicrous. Like, oh my God. And we were sold this idea that they had our best interest in mind, that this is what's best for us. Oh, this is the best we can do. It's like, fuck. Weed isn't even legal everywhere yet. Like, what? And alcohol is on every corner. And kids are going to school learning bullshit instead of being outside for like 6 to 7 hours a day and then have homework at night for 2 to 3 hours. Like, I'm getting sick.
Oh my God. No, what you just said was that like we're taught to pay attention to the distractions. That really hit because it's crazy. Like I think we all viscerally know like the education system, we all went through it. We all know that like there's just something not right with it. There's something really wrong with it if you really think about it. I always draw from my experience. I was in Montessori for like 6 months, like a kindergarten version of it. And all they do is they put you in a classroom and there's like no lessons. They just like give you a bunch of toys and books and food, and like you just pick up and do things at your own pace and you learn things at your own pace. And I remember like it very clearly. Like it had a very clear impact on me because I was able to just focus on what I wanted to focus on. But it's like, no, in the education system, you have to focus on your math class. And if you don't like it, something is wrong with you and you are stupid and you are never going to succeed. It's just like really upsetting, honestly. It's in, you think where a lot of our internalized fear comes from. Like the education system is so unforgiving. It's always like being fearful of like what's the next thing that's going to happen. It's like, oh, if I do poorly on this test, then that means that I might get held back. And then that means that I may not ever graduate. That may mean that my entire life is ruined. And that's just like not how life works. Like even with sports, you said, Andrew, like you kind of had more of that, had more of an impact on you, experiencing like the dynamics, like the social dynamics of a sports game or a sports team, like just working with teammates, like working through discomfort and issues. Like I played volleyball. And it's really interesting where in that instance, like you actually are just like engaged and having to work through things. I feel like in the education system, like you can just get really good at what they want you to do, but you're not actually like continuing to learn. Like you're kind of just adjusting to regurgitating, like studying and regurgitating. And it kind of, it's just, it's so interesting. We spend 18 years of our life doing that. It's, we're spending double that on learning all of that. So it's just, I don't know, education reform. It's got to be a must. I don't know when.
Oh, there's a lot of things that need to be reformed, but it's so very interesting that we always look at them individually, right? Like whether it's education or government or corporations in terms of the environment and pollution and corruption and so on and so forth. And at the end of the day, it's really just the mentality, right? Like the fact that we are conditioned for 12 plus years in a schooling system that was created 100 years ago and is operating under a mentality itself that we've long since abandoned. There is a parallel that I've often pointed to between prison and school, that they are the only two environments that are actually alike. School is not like any other environment you're ever going to live in or work within, except if you go to prison, where you have to fit in, you have to deal with the same people every day, you have no choice whatsoever, you have to ask if you can go to the bathroom. Right? It changes everything we do and everything we think. And then when we get out of the first 12 years of school and we go into university or college, now we have to cite the work of every other person before we can have a thought. And that thought must be backed up by other thoughts that came from the past. And so it's almost impossible to introduce a new thought whatsoever to the system, except after 18 years of conditioning. And at that point, you don't want to question the system because you've learned to fit within it.
Oh man, I'm picturing like fucking zombies coming out of the system, like the schooling system, which is kind of what it is, and it makes sense why even like on college campuses, just the pushing of alcohol and like the environment that's kind of curated around that is like setting people up to and as you said with the citing of words, and it's like there's no new thoughts, and then every week you're drinking and it's just like reinforcing this sort of numbing, like we're numbing ourselves. I fucking remember like we went out a decent amount, like my baseball team in college, we went out a decent amount because like baseball you didn't need necessarily the cardio conditioning in the same way as other sports, and but it's still like fucked up your mental clarity for sure. But like we would go out a decent amount and like I'd be either out or hungover most of the week, and still just like doing everything else, still going to class, still going to practice for 4 hours a day, still doing all those things and juggling all this stuff, but just at like 80% or 70%. And then, but it's like, when you really think about it, not to say that it was still always my choice to do it. And I was just a part of an environment that was, I don't know, pushing that and saying it was okay to do. But then you come out of it and it's like, it's kind of setting you up, setting the stage for the rest of your life. And like drinking is such a big component of the work environment. Like at my fucking office in my digital advertising job, we had a whole liquor cabinet. We had a keg in one of the offices, and then they got rid of that as we like expanded a little bit. That was more like the startup-y thing. But it's like, holy shit. They would have been better off like microdosing acid or mushrooms throughout the day if they actually wanted to get stuff done. But it's just such a part of the culture. Such a part of our culture in general is like this work hard, play hard mentality, but it's more like numb yourself and then do what you're told to fit in because everyone else is doing that. And then just keep trying to fit in and keep numbing yourself in order to fit in, and then fit in order to numb yourself, and like this back and forth that we're kind of pushed through. And so it's no wonder that the system is able to maintain itself because we're buying in to it. It really is like that machine that is just, it's pushed to numb. And then there isn't the thought of anything new because you're too fucking tired and beat down to want to think about anything new.
Yeah, we're caught in a trauma cycle, right? Like we are coping with a collective generational trauma cycle. We continue to get stuck within this generational trauma. And so it leads to more drinking and more numbing, which leads to more destruction, which leads to more drinking and more numbing, generation by generation by generation. And it's just because, again, the discomfort would be waking up to the world that we've been creating and then having to respond to it. And when people start to do that, they look at the government, they look at the system, they look at everything that's wrong, everything that we're kind of talking about right now, or even just a fragment of it. And they go, fuck that. Where's the Jack Daniels?
Yeah. I mean, alcohol played a huge role in my ability to think deeper about me and why I was unhappy or why I was suffering so much. And questioning my relationship with alcohol really spurred this ability to connect the dots, to not be kicking yourself down, if you're drinking regularly on a weekly basis, not, having to put the pieces back together on a weekly basis. That's going to keep you in the same spot if you're just working your way up, drinking, hungover. All right, I gotta work my way up again, and then I gotta knock myself down. It really is so normalized in our society. And to your point, Andrew, like I was in a sorority in college. I took that route because I didn't even know why I took it, because that was the environment I grew up in high school. Everyone was doing that. And that was where I was accepted. That's my past version of who I was fit into that. And in that environment, if you weren't drinking, then you had no life. You had no social life. You were a loser. No one wanted to be with you. You weren't cool. And you could only have true connections if you were cool in that world. And that's really impressive, Andrew, that you could operate at like 70, 80%, like through going out. I didn't operate. I wasn't okay. Like I would not, my mental state would not be okay. I couldn't keep up with it. And it's interesting because I would go through these like spells of where I had a concussion and I would think that I had post concussive syndrome because I'd hit my head once, and then I would drink and then I would forget things, and then I would wake up and it wasn't the fact that I was just really stressed and drinking pushed me over the edge and made me really feel all these things, and all this discomfort was just all being felt. I had to give it a label so where I could not have to work through it and just sit with it all and let that, take over my life. It was so interesting that alcohol fueled so many of these decapitating experiences that it is crazy that it is just so normalized and so pushed, and like you're almost rejected socially if you're not consuming alcohol. And I wouldn't be where I am right now if I was still drinking the way that I did, because you drink to numb, you drink to not feel things. I mean, that's how I was using it. I don't know how other people use it or if they're aware of they use it for that reason, but it keeps you further away from just the feeling post feeling all the shit. You feel good, but not with alcohol, because it pushes you further down. So you're not going to feel the natural highs that happen. Like it really takes all of the natural feelings to the extreme. And it is such a shame to see people stuck in it. I just don't, I don't know. I don't know. It's a weird thing. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I saw this creator once, he was explaining to an alien just the way that America works, and it was really great, because if you really think about it like through that lens, like a lot of things don't make sense. They only make sense because they've always been that way.
Well said. That's almost our whole system and society in a nutshell. They only make sense because they've always been that way, and we're not willing to wonder if there's another way they could be. Just because it's your idea of what's the best we can do doesn't mean it's the best we can do. Just because it's the best we think has ever been, despite having very little evidence of that, because we have very little evidence of human history in general. We just don't know. And rather than wondering if it could be better, we're like, no, this is it. This is the best we can do. But it's interesting just in regards to alcohol, and I know we'll probably start wrapping up here soon, but that is the drug of choice. It's like, of course it makes sense, but when you start looking at it, like, when I'm with family or something, like I'll pull out a joint or my weed pen and like rip that a couple times and get a look from someone with a full glass of wine, or with anyone. And like, that's hilarious. That is so funny. And we're even able to say like, oh, alcohol and drugs, as if alcohol isn't the worst of them all. But of course, in a society that just wants to numb, that wants to keep things the way they are, that wants to avoid looking at the shitstorm that is there when you actually take a look, when you're not so bogged down by ideas and just trying to fit in and just trying to get by till the next day. And it's understandable when people just want to get by because they're beaten down so much. They just want to get through. And that becomes the priority. But we continue to invest in the shit that's weighing us down, that's hindering us from being able to look at it. So it it makes sense, but it's alarming, and there's nothing to change but yourself, because that's what it really comes down to. Is there's no world outside of you. There's no world separate from you. So if you want the world to change, just change yourself.
And do remember that it changes faster than you think it does. Because just like those moments where you've been putting off something for years and then you decide to face the fire and it changes seemingly overnight, the same is true for us collectively. This is why I love the expression that Rome was not built in a day, but it burned in one.
And I think that is a fantastic spot to wrap this episode up. Daisy, it has been a pleasure. I appreciate you very much for hopping on here. I am very, very thrilled with just being able to connect with you, being able to chat with you, and going through everything that we did. This was a lot of fun. So I appreciate you joining us.
Thank you both for having me on. This was such a good time, and excited to continue the conversation.
Hell yeah. And for everybody listening, do go and check out the Life Unpotted podcast. It's fantastic. They are building a community there, very much in the same way that we are building a community here, just in being authentic and allowing what happens to happen. And if you are a part of that happening, then I'm sure that will just add to the collective ripple that we're all a part of. So thanks so much for joining us, everyone. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.